History is not the simple story we were taught. Across the globe, hidden in dust and stone, are clues that shatter our understanding of the past. This is a journey to 25 of the world's most baffling ancient phenomena, where you will discover evidence of impossible technology and artifacts that defy all logic. By the end, your perception of human history will be fundamentally challenged. How did a 2,000-year-old Greek device predict eclipses with clockwork precision? Why would a civilization bury the world's oldest temple completely intact? What do you believe is waiting to be uncovered? The first clue surfaced from the wreck of a Roman cargo ship, lost for 2,000 years in the deep blue waters off the Greek island of Antikythera. Sponge divers in the year 1900 stumbled upon the shattered remains of statues and pottery, but among the corroded artifacts was a lump of bronze and wood that seemed utterly unremarkable. It was only years later, when the lump began to crack and flake, that researchers saw the glint of something impossible within. There were gears, delicate, intricate, interlocking bronze gears housed in a wooden case no larger than a shoebox. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, and it has been called the world's first analog computer. The device is astoundingly complex. X-ray and modern scanning technology have revealed at least 30 intermeshed gears, some with teeth cut with such precision they could fit a modern watch. Its front face featured dials tracking the movements of the sun and the moon through the zodiac, while inscriptions served as a sophisticated user manual. One dial even predicted the dates of future solar and lunar eclipses, factoring in the subtle wobbles of the moon's orbit, a cycle known as the Saros cycle. This was not a simple calendar. It was a mechanical model of the cosmos, a portable planetarium operated by a hand crank. The profound mystery here is not just its existence, but its isolation. This device was constructed around 80 to 60 years before the Common Era. Yet nothing of comparable mechanical sophistication would appear again in the historical record for well over 1,000 years. The knowledge required to design and build it, an understanding of advanced astronomy, metallurgy, and precision engineering, seems to have vanished completely from the Mediterranean world. It raises a haunting question. Was this a unique masterpiece, the pinnacle of a forgotten school of ancient engineering? Or was it merely a single surviving example of a technology that was once more common? Its discovery forces us to reconsider the technological ceiling of the ancient world, suggesting pockets of genius that flickered brightly and were then inexplicably snuffed out by the passage of time. That same question of vanished genius echoes from a different corner of the ancient world, not in the form of intricate gears, but in a collection of simple clay jars. In the 1930s, workers digging near Baghdad uncovered a set of peculiar artifacts from the Parthian period, around 2,000 years old. Each jar was about the size of a fist, sealed at the top with a plug of asphalt. Inside, a rolled copper cylinder housed an iron rod. To the untrained eye, they looked like nothing more than odd storage containers, perhaps for sacred scrolls. But when a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig examined them, a startling hypothesis emerged. If you filled such a jar with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the interaction between the two dissimilar metals and the electrolyte could produce a small electrical charge. In essence, it looked like a primitive battery, a galvanic cell. The implications were electrifying, quite literally. Could the Parthians, or perhaps the later Sasanians who also occupied the region, have harnessed a basic form of electricity? Proponents of the battery theory suggest a practical, almost magical application: electroplating. A weak current from several of these cells linked together could have been used to deposit a thin layer of gold or silver onto statues or jewelry, a process that would have seemed like alchemy to ancient observers. Others propose a more mystical use, perhaps administering small shocks in religious rituals to simulate divine power. The debate, however, is fierce. Mainstream archaeology remains deeply skeptical. Many experts argue the jars are far more likely to have been used for storing sacred scrolls, with the iron rod simply acting as a protective core for the precious papyrus or parchment, and the asphalt providing a hermetic seal. No wires or conductors have ever been found with them, and no contemporary texts describe anything resembling electrical knowledge. Yet the mystery endures precisely because the design is so provocatively complete. The components are all there: copper, iron, electrolyte, and an insulating stopper. Whether by incredible accident or by lost intention, these humble jars from Baghdad force us to confront a tantalizing possibility. Did a spark of understanding, a glimpse of a force that would not be formally harnessed for another millennium, briefly flicker in the ancient Middle East, only to be buried and forgotten once more? The line between a forgotten technology and a lost language is a thin one, and perhaps no artifact straddles it more completely than a book that should not exist. In the year 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich acquired a strange manuscript from a collection of ancient texts in Italy. What he found was not inscribed on crumbling papyrus or etched in stone, but carefully penned on fine vellum, its pages filled from edge to edge with a script unlike any seen on Earth. This is the Voynich manuscript, a 240-page puzzle that has defied every attempt at a solution for over a century. The text is written in an alphabet of perhaps 20 to 30 unique characters, flowing in a seemingly grammatical structure with clear word and sentence breaks. It looks like a real language, but it corresponds to nothing known, and the illustrations that accompany this unreadable text only deepen the mystery. They depict a world both familiar and utterly alien. There are pages upon pages of botanical drawings of plants that no botanist has ever been able to identify, with bulbous roots and fantastical leaves that seem to belong to another planet. There are intricate astrological charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and zodiac symbols, and most curiously, there are sections showing plump, nude women bathing in or interacting with a complex network of green, interconnecting pipes and pools, a scene that has been interpreted as anything from a biological treatise to a diagram of a mystical fountain of youth. The failure to crack this code is absolute. The world's top cryptographers, including teams from the CIA and NSA who broke enemy codes during wartime, have turned their formidable skills to the Voynich and walked away utterly baffled. Every statistical analysis of the text shows patterns consistent with a natural language, not random gibberish, yet it remains impenetrable. This complete deadlock has given birth to a spectrum of wild theories. Some argue it is an elaborate Renaissance-era hoax created to defraud a wealthy patron, a meaningless text crafted to look profound. Others believe it records a genuine lost language, perhaps a constructed one for a secret society or the dialect of a vanished culture. More fanciful suggestions have proposed it as a pharmacopoeia of esoteric herbal knowledge, a manual for alchemical processes, or even a communication from a non-human intelligence. Recent carbon dating places the vellum between 1404 and 1430 and 8, confirming its medieval origin, but this only solidifies the mystery rather than solving it. The Voynich manuscript is a ghost of meaning. It sits in a library at Yale University, a complete and coherent message from the past, screaming in a silent language that we have lost all ability to hear. It is a stark reminder that history is not just about the stories we can read, but about the countless stories whose alphabets have been permanently erased. The silence of an unreadable book finds its parallel in the roar of stone, where ancient builders left a message not in ink but in impossible geometry. High above the Inca capital of Cusco in Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman presents a puzzle of staggering physicality. Its defining feature is a series of 3 zigzagging walls, built from limestone blocks so colossal they defy belief. The largest of these stones is estimated to weigh over 120 tons, as much as a commercial jetliner, and it was hauled up a steep mountainside without the wheel, without draft animals, and set into place with a perfection that humbles modern engineers. The real mystery is not the size, but the fit. Each of these gigantic boulders, with their complex 12-angled faces, was carved to interlock perfectly with its neighbors. The joints are so precise that for centuries it has been said not even a blade of grass or the thin edge of a credit card can slip between them. This is not simple stacking. The stones were meticulously shaped to sit in a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, a technique that provided incredible seismic stability, allowing the walls to survive devastating earthquakes that leveled the Spanish colonial buildings constructed atop them. How was this achieved? The official narrative credits the Inca with incredible patience, using stone hammers, bronze tools, and abrasives like sand to slowly grind each block into shape over generations. Yet the scale and precision invite deeper questions. How did they achieve such flawless flatness and such intricate angles across surfaces many meters wide using only primitive tools? The walls stand as a silent, monumental testament to a stoneworking skill that appears to border on the supernatural. That same whisper of advanced technology screams from the ruins of Puma Punku near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Here, the mystery shifts from colossal weight to impossible precision, dating back an estimated 1,500 years and attributed to the Tiwanaku culture that predates the Inca. Puma Punku looks less like a ruin and more like a factory floor struck by a cataclysmic explosion. Scattered across the high-altitude plain are shattered blocks of andesite and diorite, some of the hardest stones on the planet. These are not rough-hewn rocks. They are architectural components of mind-bending complexity. The most famous are the so-called H-blocks, massive stone forms shaped with absolute geometric perfection, featuring flawless right angles and recessed channels cut with a consistency that looks machined. Some stones have precise, shallow depressions drilled in perfect grids, while others feature intricate, interlocking slots and tabs, like pieces from a giant stone Lego set designed by a master engineer. The level of workmanship required is baffling. Diorite is a granite-like stone with a hardness just below diamond. To cut, shape, and polish it to this standard would require tools far beyond the presumed copper chisels and stone hammers of the era. The edges are razor-sharp, the surfaces perfectly flat, and the repeating patterns suggest the use of templates or a standardized measuring system of incredible sophistication. Mainstream archaeology suggests the use of laborious techniques with stone tools and abrasive sand, but even proponents of this view acknowledge the work represents a staggering, almost inexplicable investment of time and skill for an ancient culture. The ruins of Puma Punku feel like the scattered pieces of a technology we no longer understand, a stark reminder that our ancestors may have possessed secrets of fabrication and design that were lost long before the first history books were ever written. From the precision of a single stone block to art on a continental scale, the mysteries only grow larger. Etched across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines transform 450 square kilometers of desert into the world's most enigmatic canvas. These are not small carvings, they are geoglyphs, massive designs created by removing the dark, sun-baked top layer of pebbles to reveal the lighter earth beneath. From ground level, they appear as shallow, meandering paths, but from the vantage point of a nearby hill, or more dramatically from the air, their true forms resolve into staggering clarity. A hummingbird with wings outstretched over 100 meters, a spider with legs perfectly proportioned, a monkey with a spiraling tail. Alongside these biomorphic figures are straight lines that run for kilometers, perfect triangles, trapezoids, and spirals that seem to stretch toward the horizon. The sheer scale is incomprehensible from the Earth. The creators, the Nazca people, who flourished between 500 before the Common Era and 500 after, could never have seen their work in its full glory. This is the core of the mystery. Why would a culture invest centuries of labor to create monumental art they themselves could never visually appreciate? The most accepted theories are grounded in ceremony and cosmology. Many researchers believe the lines were ritual pathways walked by priests during sacred ceremonies to invoke the deities represented by the animal figures, possibly to plead for water in this brutally dry landscape. The straight lines may have pointed toward sources of water or aligned with celestial events like the solstice sun, turning the entire desert into a giant astronomical calendar or a map of sacred geography. The act of creation itself, the communal effort of moving tons of rock, may have been as important as the final image. Yet, the inability to view the completed work has fueled more speculative ideas. The most famous and most controversial was proposed in the 1960s by writer Erich von Däniken, who suggested the lines were landing strips or signals for ancient extraterrestrial visitors. While this idea is dismissed by archaeologists due to a complete lack of supporting evidence, it persists in popular culture precisely because the visual spectacle feels so deliberately aerial. How did the Nazca plan and execute such perfectly proportioned, gigantic designs without an overhead view? The practical answer is surprisingly elegant. Scholars have demonstrated that using simple tools, stakes, and cords, a small team could scale up a design from a small model, transferring it point by point across the vast landscape. It was a feat of meticulous surveying, not alien technology, but the mystery is not solved. In recent years, the use of drones and satellite imagery has revealed a shocking truth. We are still discovering new lines, dozens of previously unknown geoglyphs, some even older and possibly created by the Paracas culture that preceded the Nazca, have been found etched into hillsides, suggesting this tradition was more widespread and complex than we ever imagined. Each new line is a question without an answer, a message drawn in earth that we are only just beginning to see. But the scale of human ambition reaches its absolute zenith not in lines on a plain, but in a mountain of stone built for eternity. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as the sole surviving wonder of the ancient world, a monument so familiar that its true, staggering absurdity is often lost. We all know it was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu around 2,500 years before the Common Era, but the standard explanations crumble when confronted with the sheer physics of its construction. This was not just a big building project, it was a logistical nightmare executed with impossible precision. Start with the raw material. The pyramid is composed of approximately 2,300,000 individual blocks of limestone and granite. Each block weighs on average 2.5 tons. That is the equivalent of lifting 2 family cars over 2 million times. The granite blocks used in the king's chamber are far heavier, some exceeding 50 tons. The question of how they moved these stones is only the beginning. The limestone was quarried locally, but the granite came from Aswan over 800 kilometers up the Nile. Conventional theory says they floated these megaliths on barges during the annual flood, then dragged them on sledges across the desert. Yet, the act of lifting them into place is where the mystery truly deepens. The pyramid rises 146 meters. The standard ramp theory, while logical, presents colossal problems. A straight ramp tall enough to reach the top would have required more material than the pyramid itself, and a spiraling ramp wrapped around the structure would have been too steep for dragging multi-ton blocks and would have obscured the crucial surveying needed to maintain the pyramid's perfect shape. There is no archaeological evidence for any ramp system of the necessary scale. Then there is the precision which borders on the obsessive. The pyramid is aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree. Its base is a near-perfect square with sides differing by only a few centimeters. This accuracy, achieved over a 13-acre foundation, would be a challenge for modern engineers with laser levels and satellite GPS. Inside, the mysteries multiply. The so-called King's Chamber is built from immense blocks of red granite, fitted together with joints so tight and smooth that the surfaces appear polished. On some of these interior granite stones, there are areas curiously devoid of the expected tool marks. This odd absence has fueled one of the most controversial alternative theories, the idea of a lost casting technique. A small but vocal group of researchers, like the late Joseph Davidovits, proposed that the pyramid blocks were not quarried and hauled, but were essentially a form of ancient geopolymer, a reconstituted limestone concrete poured into wooden molds on site. This, they argue, would explain the lack of tool marks, the perfect fits, and the logistical impossibility of moving so many stones. Mainstream Egyptology strongly rejects this, pointing to quarry marks, tool evidence, and the clear identification of natural stone strata in the blocks. Yet another fringe idea, drawn from various global legends, suggests the use of acoustic levitation, that the builders somehow used sound resonance to neutralize the weight of the stones. While there is no credible evidence for this, its persistence speaks to the depth of our bafflement. The Great Pyramid, in the end, is a paradox. It is the most studied ancient structure on Earth, and yet its most fundamental question, how it was actually built, remains without a definitive, satisfying answer. It is a testament not just to a pharaoh's ego, but to a civilization that achieved a peak of organizational and technical skill so high that from our distant vantage point, it looks almost like magic. The obsession with perfect geometry did not end with pyramids or walls. In the dense jungles of Costa Rica, workers clearing land for banana plantations in the 1930s uncovered a different kind of perfection, one that was profoundly unnatural. Scattered across the Diquis Delta were hundreds of stone spheres known locally as Los Bolas. They were not merely round rocks. They were spheres of such incredible precision that they seemed to defy the tools and time of their creators, the Diquis culture, who flourished from around 800 to 1500 after the Common Era. Carved from a hard volcanic rock called gabbro, these spheres range in size from a child's plaything to colossal orbs over 2 meters in diameter and weighing more than 16 tons. The largest ones are so massive and perfectly shaped that they feel less like artifacts and more like the abandoned toys of giants. The technical achievement is staggering. Achieving a near-flawless spherical shape from such hard stone without the use of metal tools would have required a masterful understanding of geometry and relentless, patient craftsmanship. Archaeologists believe the process likely involved carefully heating the stone, then using other, smaller stones to chip and peck away at the surface, followed by endless hours of grinding with sand and water to achieve that impossible smoothness. But the how, as fascinating as it is overshadowed by the haunting question of why. What was the purpose of dedicating such immense effort to create hundreds of these perfect forms? The spheres were often found arranged in groups, sometimes in straight lines, sometimes in geometric patterns like triangles or parallelograms. This has led to the compelling theory that they were astronomical markers, their alignments pointing to celestial events or acting as a physical map of constellations. Others see them as symbols of power and status, placed near the homes of chiefs to denote authority, or perhaps used as territorial markers between different communities. The most heartbreaking layer of this mystery, however, is that we may never know for certain. In the initial rush of discovery, many spheres were dynamited by treasure hunters convinced they held gold inside. Countless others were rolled away from their original sites using bulldozers, to be used as eccentric lawn ornaments in government buildings or private gardens. This thoughtless displacement destroyed the sphere's archaeological context forever. We can measure their perfection, but we can no longer see the patterns they formed in the landscape. Their original arrangement was the key to their meaning, a code written in stone across the jungle floor, and that code has been irrevocably scrambled. The spheres now sit in isolation, magnificent yet mute. Their perfect shapes a beautiful, frustrating testament to a truth we can almost but not quite reach. While the spheres of Costa Rica stand in silent isolation, a carving on an Egyptian temple wall seems to shout a secret across the centuries. Deep within the crypts of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a relief carved in the Ptolemaic period over 2,000 years ago depicts a scene that has ignited one of the most persistent and controversial theories of ancient technology. The image is strikingly specific. A priest is shown kneeling, holding aloft a large, elongated object that resembles a modern glass bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches its body toward the narrow end. This serpentine form is supported by a pillar, which some interpret as an insulator, and the entire assembly is connected by a cable to a box, which rests upon a pedestal that looks remarkably like a battery. To the modern eye, the resemblance to an electric light bulb is uncanny, almost provocative. This is the so-called Dendera light, and for proponents of the ancient electricity theory, it is not a symbol but a schematic. They argue the scene is a literal depiction of illumination technology, with the bulb containing an inert gas, the snake acting as a glowing filament, the box as a power source like the Baghdad Battery, and the pillar preventing a dangerous ground. It is a compelling visual argument suggesting the dark, windowless inner chambers of Egyptian temples might have been lit not just by flickering, smoky torches, but by a steady, clean electric glow. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a profoundly different and deeply symbolic interpretation. Scholars point to the rich iconography of Egyptian creation myths. In this context, the bulb is not a bulb at all, but the womb of the sky goddess Nut, or more commonly, a giant lotus flower. In Egyptian mythology, the lotus is the first thing to emerge from the primordial waters at the dawn of creation. The snake inside is not a filament but a symbol of the god Harsomptus, a form of the child sun god, emerging from the lotus to bring light and life to the world. The pillar is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The box is not a battery but a shrine. The entire scene, they explain, is a well-known cosmological tableau representing the moment of creation, the birth of the sun from the sacred lotus, an act of divine power, not electrical engineering. They further argue that if the Egyptians possessed portable electric lights, evidence would be everywhere, in tomb paintings showing their use, in the archaeological record with wires or more batteries, or in texts describing their maintenance. No such evidence exists, so are we seeing a forgotten technology, or are we imposing our modern worldview onto an ancient spiritual symbol? The power of the Dendera light mystery lies precisely in this tension. Our brains are wired for pattern recognition, and when we see a shape that so closely mirrors a familiar object, the leap feels natural. Yet, to dismiss the mainstream view is to ignore the complex, metaphor-driven language of Egyptian art, where every image is layered with meaning about gods, cosmos, and the afterlife. Perhaps the most fascinating interpretation lies in the middle. Could the relief be both? The ancient Egyptians described the sun's journey in terms of a boat because that was a technology they understood. Is it possible they conceptualized the mysterious, invisible force of divine light using the closest technological analogy they could imagine, a contained, glowing object? Whether it is a literal blueprint or a spiritual metaphor, the Dendera carving forces a humbling realization. It reminds us that the past communicates in a visual language we are still learning to read, where the line between a description of the physical world and a map of the sacred one is beautifully and permanently blurred. But the most profound ancient mysteries are not always found reaching for the sky. Sometimes they are hidden deep within the earth, in spaces of such staggering scale that their very existence feels like a geological secret. In the quiet countryside of Zhejiang Province, China, local farmers made a discovery in 1992 that would reveal one of these secrets. Pumping water out of what they thought were small, natural ponds, they uncovered not a muddy bottom, but the entrance to an immense hand-carved cavern. This was the first of the Longyu Caves, a network of at least 24 artificial grottos, each one a monumental feat of underground engineering. The scale is almost incomprehensible. The largest of these caverns covers an area of over 12,000 square meters, with pillars left in place to support a ceiling that soars to a height of 30 meters. That is the volume of a cathedral carved by hand, one hammer strike at a time from solid sandstone. The sheer amount of rock removed is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. Yet the mystery is not just the size, but the eerie uniformity. Every single surface, every wall, pillar, and ceiling across all 24 caves is covered in a consistent pattern of parallel chisel marks, a uniform series of lines etched at a precise 60-degree angle. This is not functional tooling. It is a deliberate aesthetic choice, a signature applied with obsessive consistency across a project that would have taken generations to complete. Who ordered this Herculean labor? Who were the thousands of workers who toiled in the dark, and for what possible purpose? There are no historical records, no inscriptions, no artifacts left behind. The caves are a perfect architectural void. Theories range from a secret imperial tomb complex that was never used to a massive mining operation, though no valuable minerals have been found. Some suggest they were created as hidden reservoirs or granaries, but the intricate, decorative chiseling argues against a purely utilitarian function. The Longyu Caves are a monument to a purpose we cannot decipher, a message written not in words, but in the very shape of the void itself, a colossal question mark carved into the bedrock of China. On the other side of Asia, in the heart of Turkey's Cappadocia region, another underground wonder presents a very different and far more urgent purpose. Here, the soft volcanic rock, known as tuff, allowed for the creation of not just caves but entire cities. The deepest and most magnificent of these is Derinkuyu. Discovered in 1963 when a resident knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room behind it, Derinkuyu is not a simple shelter. It is a vertical metropolis plunging over 85 meters deep into the earth with at least 18 discovered levels. This was not a temporary hideout. It was a self-sustaining refuge capable of housing up to 20,000 people for months at a time. The engineering is breathtaking in its foresight. A labyrinth of living quarters, storage rooms, wine and oil presses, and even stables for livestock are all connected by a network of narrow, easily defensible corridors. Massive circular stone doors weighing up to 500 kilograms could be rolled across key passages to seal off entire sections from the inside. But the true genius of Derinkuyu lies in its life support systems. Over 50 ventilation shafts, some stretching all the way to the surface, provided a constant flow of fresh air to even the deepest chambers. Dozens of wells tapped into a subterranean water table, ensuring a secure supply even during a surface siege. There were communal kitchens, churches, and burial grounds, everything needed for a society to survive and maintain order in total darkness. This level of planning reveals a people who lived under a constant, looming threat. But who built it, and what were they hiding from? The most common attribution is to early Christian communities, perhaps as early as the 7th or 8th century, seeking refuge from Arab raids or later from Mongol invasions. However, the oldest parts of the complex may be far older, with some archaeologists suggesting Phrygian origins as early as the 8th century before the Common Era. The truth is, Derinkuyu was likely expanded and modified by successive generations over millennia, a communal project born of repeated necessity. It stands as a stark monument to human resilience in the face of perpetual danger, a testament to the desperate ingenuity that drives people not to build towers but to master the art of disappearance. Together, Longyu and Derinkuyu represent two faces of the same profound mystery. One is a purposeless masterpiece, a work of art on a geological scale whose reason is lost. The other is a masterpiece of purpose, a fortress of survival whose terrifying reasons are all too easy to imagine. Both remind us that history is not only written in what was built upon the land, but but also in what was carved with immense effort into the silent heart of the earth itself. While some ancient builders carved entire cities from the rock, others chose to inscribe a single slab with a message we can no longer read. In 1937, in a farmer's field near Clydebank, Scotland, an archaeologist named Ludovic Mann unearthed a sandstone slab that would become one of Europe's most enigmatic artifacts. Known as the Cochno stone, this 5,000-year-old rock surface, roughly the size of 2 parking spaces, is not decorated with simple scratches. It is a dense, overwhelming tapestry of art covered in over 90 deeply carved symbols. The most prominent are intricate spirals, some swirling inward, others spiraling out. They are joined by concentric circles like ripples frozen in stone, and by thousands of peculiar cup marks, small hemispherical depressions often surrounded by one or more rings. This style of carving is known as cup and ring marks, and they are found scattered across Neolithic sites in the British Isles and Europe, but the Cochno stone is unique. It is the largest and most complex collection of these symbols ever discovered, a grand canvas of prehistoric thought. The immediate, visceral question is, what does it all mean? The symbols feel intentional, systematic, almost like a code. One leading theory suggests it is a celestial map. The spirals and concentric circles could chart the movements of the sun and moon, or perhaps represent specific constellations, with the cup marks acting as fixed stars. In this reading, the stone is not art but an ancient observatory, a permanent record of the sky carved into the earth. A more spiritual interpretation sees it as a portal. Many ancient cultures viewed spirals as symbols of life, death, and rebirth, a journey into another realm. The stone's location, near a natural spring, supports the idea of it being a sacred site, a ritual focus where priests or shamans could symbolically travel to the underworld or commune with ancestors. The concentric circles might represent those different layers of reality. Another, more abstract idea proposes the stone is a diagram of cosmic energy, a literal map of telluric currents or ley lines believed to flow through the landscape, with the carvings marking powerful nodes or intersections. The true frustration is that all these theories are plausible and none are provable. The culture that created the Cochno stone left no written key. In the 1960s, in a well-intentioned but controversial act, archaeologists made a startling decision. To protect the stone from vandalism and weathering, they buried it. They covered the entire magnificent panel with several feet of earth, hiding it from view. Today, it lies dormant beneath a grassy field, its secrets literally returned to the soil. This act of preservation feels deeply symbolic. It is as if we, in our modern era, acknowledge that we are not yet ready to understand its language. The Cochno stone is a locked door, and for now, we have chosen to walk away, leaving the key buried with it, waiting for a future generation with sharper eyes or a brighter insight to finally decipher its swirling, silent story. This silent language of stone finds its most revolutionary expression on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey. For millennia, the mound known as Göbekli Tepe was dismissed as nothing more than an old, unremarkable cemetery hill. That changed in the 1990s when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began to dig. What he uncovered would not just rewrite history, it would tear up the entire timeline of human civilization. This is not a temple from the age of pyramids or empires. Göbekli Tepe is staggeringly ancient, built around 11,600 years ago, a time when humanity was believed to be living in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. Yet here, on this barren hill, they erected the world's oldest known megalithic temple, a complex of stunning sophistication that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Great Pyramid by 7,000 years. The site is composed of multiple circular enclosures, each defined by a ring of massive limestone T-shaped pillars. These monoliths are enormous, the tallest standing over 5.5 meters high and weighing up to 15 tons. They were quarried from a nearby bedrock, shaped and transported up the hill without the wheel, without pack animals, by people who had not yet invented pottery or metal tools. But the true mystery is carved into their very fabric. The pillars are not blank. They are adorned with a breathtaking menagerie of high-relief sculptures. A snarling fox leaps across the stone, a menacing scorpion curls its tail, a powerful boar charges forward. There are ducks, cranes, and imposing vultures, their wings spread wide. These are not crude scratches. They are detailed, artistic, and full of symbolic power, a Stone Age bestiary frozen in time. This artwork alone would make Göbekli Tepe a wonder, but its implications are what truly shatter conventional wisdom. For over a century, archaeologists have taught a clear story of human progress. First came the agricultural revolution, where people learned to farm and domesticate animals. This surplus of food allowed for permanent settlements, which led to complex social structures, specialization of labor, and finally, the spare time and resources to build monumental architecture for religion and power. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence completely on its head. It was built by hunter-gatherers. There is no evidence of agriculture or permanent housing at the site during its construction phase. This means these nomadic people came together from possibly vast distances to undertake a decades-long project of staggering difficulty. They did this not because they had a surplus of food, but perhaps to create the very social glue that would later make society possible. The temple and the communal rituals held there may have been the catalyst for civilization, not the result of it. It suggests that the human drive to create meaning, to worship, and to build collectively on a grand scale is not a product of settled life, but a fundamental force that helped create it. And then, as mysteriously as it began, the project ended. Around 8,000 before the Common Era, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something almost unthinkable. They deliberately buried their entire temple, not in a collapse or disaster, but with careful intention, hauling thousands of tons of soil and rubble to fill the enclosures, preserving the pillars in a time capsule of earth. Why? Was it a sacred act of decommissioning, a ritual entombment of a holy place? Did beliefs change, requiring the old symbols to be hidden from view? Or was it an act of protection, shielding their most sacred site from some impending threat or from future generations who might not understand its power? The burial is what saved Göbekli Tepe, keeping its carvings pristine for us to discover over 11 millennia later. It stands as a profound and humbling question mark at the very dawn of our story, proving that the seeds of civilization were sown not in wheat fields, but in the human mind's desire to reach for something greater than itself, to carve its dreams into pillars of stone, and then, for reasons we can only guess, to gently return them to the earth. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe speaks to a powerful, almost reverent need to preserve a sacred legacy. On a remote island in the vast Pacific, a different ancient people faced a similar imperative, but their legacy stands in plain sight, staring silently across the ocean. The monolithic statues of Easter Island, the Moai, are icons of isolation and mystery. We know them as the giant stone heads, but that familiar image is a deception of time. These are not just heads, they are full-bodied figures, most buried up to their necks in sediment over the centuries, carved from compressed volcanic ash at a single quarry, and then transported somehow to ceremonial platforms called ahu all around the coastline. The scale of this undertaking on such a small, remote island is almost beyond belief. The largest completed moai, named Paro, stands over 10 meters tall and weighs an estimated 82 tons. That is heavier than a fully loaded commercial jet, and it was moved without wheels, without pulleys, and without any draft animals larger than a chicken, for a distance of 6 kilometers from the quarry to its final resting place. How was this possible? For generations, this has been the central, haunting question. The oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people themselves speak of the statues walking to their platforms, guided by the spiritual power or mana of chiefs and priests. For a long time, modern scholars dismissed this as pure myth. The conventional theory involved log rollers and large teams of people slowly dragging the statues on their backs across the rugged landscape, a process that would have consumed vast quantities of timber and required incredible coordination. But in recent years, experimental archaeology has breathed startling new life into the ancient legend. A compelling theory, tested by researchers like Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, suggests the statues really did walk. Their hypothesis involves a dynamic rocking motion. By using 3 strong ropes, teams could tilt the statue forward, pivot it on one edge, and then rock it to the other side, inching the colossal figure forward in an upright, swaying gait. Video demonstrations show a replica Moai seemingly walking with a slow, dignified wobble. This method would be far more efficient than dragging, requiring fewer people and no logs, and it eerily matches the oral history. Yet it remains fiercely debated. Other researchers argue for a system of wooden sledges and lubricated tracks or sophisticated levering techniques. The truth is, no single method has been proven definitively, and each attempt to replicate the feat reveals new layers of complexity and risk. The transport of the Moai was not just an engineering challenge, it was an act of profound communal faith, a tangible expression of belief that mobilized an entire society. But the stone giants are only half the mystery. Easter Island holds a second, more intimate enigma. Scattered across the island are wooden tablets and ceremonial objects inscribed with glyphs unlike any other writing system in Polynesia. This is Rongorongo, a script of elegant, fluid symbols depicting birds, fish, plants, and geometric forms. They are beautiful and utterly unreadable. The script appears to be a form of proto-writing, but its purpose and meaning died with the last trained scribes in the 19th century. Attempts to decipher it have led nowhere. The symbols do not correspond to any known language, and the few surviving texts are too short for comparative analysis. Some believe it was a memory aid for reciting genealogies or sacred chants, not a true phonetic script. Others see it as a unique invention, a cultural spark that ignited in total isolation. The tragedy is that its loss was likely a direct result of the social collapse that also ended the statue-building era. Rongorongo is a ghost of a lost intellectual world, a whisper of stories, histories, and prayers that we can see but cannot hear. Together, the walking giants and the silent script tell a dual tale of a people who reached staggering heights of artistic and organizational achievement on their lonely island, only to see the very traditions that define them fade into a silence as deep as the surrounding sea. The silent prayers of Rapa Nui and the buried temples of Turkey hint at a past charged with powerful emotion. But what if that emotional energy never truly dissipated? A fringe but persistent idea suggests the very stones of ancient sites might hold echoes of the past, not as inscriptions but as invisible recordings. This is the stone tape theory, a paranormal concept proposing that intense emotional or traumatic events can somehow be imprinted onto the mineral structures of stone or other materials, like a natural video cassette. Under the right conditions, perhaps involving atmospheric pressure or the psychic sensitivity of a witness, this recording is then played back, manifesting as phantom sounds, fleeting visions, or the chilling sensation of a presence. It is a theory that boldly bridges the gap between hard archaeology and the intangible world of hauntings, offering a pseudo-scientific explanation for experiences reported at historical locations for centuries. Consider the rolling fields of England, where the site of the Battle of Hastings in 1066 has long been a hotspot for strange accounts. Visitors and researchers have reported hearing the distant, muffled sounds of clashing steel, the desperate cries of men, and the thunder of cavalry on otherwise quiet days. No visual apparitions, just disembodied audio, as if a terrible event left its sonic signature on the landscape. Similarly, many medieval castles with violent histories are famed not just for one ghost but for recurring scenes. The Tower of London, for instance, has countless legends, but some witnesses describe seeing brief, silent tableaus of figures in period dress engaged in frantic activity, moments that flash and are gone like a fragment of film caught in a loop. The stone tape theory argues these are not intelligent spirits but impersonal residues, psychic scars on the location itself. The concept gained popular traction in the 1970s, partly through a BBC television play of the same name, but its roots are in earlier spiritualist and psychical research. Proponents point to the properties of quartz, a mineral common in granite and sandstone, which can hold an electrical charge under pressure, a phenomenon known as piezoelectricity. Could a moment of extreme collective fear, pain, or celebration during a battle, a sacrifice, or a coronation create a similar psychical charge that the surrounding stone absorbs and stores? Skeptics, of course, dismiss the idea entirely. They attribute such experiences to psychological factors like expectation and suggestion, combined with natural environmental sounds, the wind whistling through ruins, the settling of old stones, or even infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that can induce feelings of unease and hallucinations. From a scientific standpoint, there is no known mechanism for stone to record and replay complex sensory information. Yet, the theory's enduring appeal lies in its elegant, if unproven, answer to a specific type of haunting. It explains why some phenomena seem mindless and repetitive, why they are tied to a specific location rather than following a person, and why they often involve events of high drama. It transforms a ghost from a wandering soul into a fossilized moment, a piece of history that has, in a sense, literally become part of the architecture. Whether you find it a compelling metaphor or a literal possibility, the stone tape theory reframes our relationship with ancient spaces. It suggests that when we walk through a ruined castle or a forgotten battlefield, we might not just be walking on history, but through a layered tapestry of emotional energy where the past is not dead, but sleeping in the stones, waiting for a chance to whisper its story one more time. Yet if the stones themselves can whisper, what are we to make of metal that speaks from a time before metal should exist? On the remote slopes of Mount Baigong in China's Qinghai province, a discovery pushes the boundaries of both geology and history. Here, near the shores of the brackish Tosan Lake, a triangular cave entrance opens into a stark, dry chamber. Inside, protruding from the walls and ceiling, are dozens of iron pipes. They are not a modern installation. They are heavily oxidized, fused with the surrounding rock as if they have been there for eons. These are the Baigong pipes, and their mystery is not just their presence but their apparent purpose. The pipes vary in diameter from thin straw-like tubes to some nearly half a meter across, and they are not random. They extend from deep within the cave out toward the lake, and others are reportedly found submerged in the lake itself, as well as scattered along the shore. This arrangement suggests a deliberate system, a network for channeling water or perhaps some other substance from the lake into the mountain, or vice versa. The composition of the pipes, as analyzed in limited studies, adds another layer of strangeness. While primarily iron oxide, they are said to contain unusual amounts of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide, and reports suggest a significant portion of the material is unidentifiable. This has fueled the extraordinary claim that the pipes are ancient, perhaps tens of thousands of years old, remnants of a lost industrial complex from a prehistoric civilization. Proponents of this view argue that the natural landscape supports the idea, pointing to pyramidal rock formations on the mountain that look artificially shaped. They see a complete, if ruined, facility, a mountain base, piping, and a saltwater source. The official scientific explanation, however, is far more mundane, yet no less fascinating. Geologists propose that these are not pipes at all, but the fossilized casts of tree roots. Here is how the process would work. Millions of years ago, during a warmer, wetter period, this arid region was likely forested. When trees died, their roots decayed, leaving hollow tunnels in the sediment. Over immense geological time, iron-rich water percolated through these hollows, depositing minerals that slowly filled the voids, creating solid, tube-like structures that perfectly mirrored the original root systems. Subsequent tectonic uplift and erosion then exposed these mineralized casts, which now look like manufactured pipes. This process, known as dendritic mineralization, is a known geological phenomenon and can produce surprisingly symmetrical and varied forms. It explains the branching patterns some observers note, the variation in pipe sizes, and the high iron content from the local bedrock. The debate, therefore, is a classic clash of perspectives. One sees a deliberate, intelligent arrangement pointing to human, or perhaps non-human, activity in a deep, forgotten past. The other sees the slow, magnificent, and utterly blind artistry of geological processes, which can create the illusion of design over millions of years. The Bagong pipes force a fundamental question about how we interpret the past. When we encounter something that looks engineered, are we seeing the handiwork of a lost builder, or are we witnessing the profound power of nature to mimic the very patterns we associate with intelligence? The answer may lie not in choosing one side, but in recognizing that both possibilities reveal a deep truth. Our world is capable of producing wonders that continually challenge the line between what is made and what simply became. The geological illusion of the Bagong pipes finds its most iconic and controversial counterpart in a small Texas creek bed. In the summer of 1936, a couple hiking along the banks of the Red Creek near the town of London, Texas, spotted a curious piece of weathered rock protruding from the stone. Breaking it open, they found something utterly impossible nestled inside. It was a hammer, a common carpenter's hammer with a 6-inch iron head and a wooden handle, but it was completely encased in a solid nodule of Cretaceous limestone, a formation dated by geologists to be over 100 million years old. The hammer itself seemed to defy this age. The wooden handle was partially petrified, turned to stone, yet it also showed signs of carbonization, as if it had begun to turn to coal. The iron head, meanwhile, was strangely pure, lacking the slag inclusions typical of 19th century metallurgy, and showed almost no signs of rust despite its presumed eons of burial. To those who first examined it, the artifact presented an unresolvable paradox, a clearly man-made tool, seemingly trapped in stone from an era when, according to all established science, humans did not exist. This is the London hammer, and it has become a foundational piece of evidence for creationist and alternative history circles. Their argument is stark and simple. The hammer is genuine, the rock is genuine, and therefore the established geological timeline must be wrong. If a modern tool is encased in 100-million-year-old stone, then humans must have walked the earth alongside dinosaurs, a direct challenge to the theory of evolution and the entire fossil record. For them, the artifact is not an anomaly to be explained away, but a key piece of discarded truth, proof of a cataclysmic global flood that buried tools and dinosaurs together in a recent catastrophic event. The purity of the iron is cited as evidence of a lost, advanced metallurgical technique from this antediluvian civilization. Mainstream geology, however, offers a far different and well-documented explanation, one that revolves not around time travel or lost epochs, but around a common natural process. The hammer is real, but the rock casing is not a solid chunk of ancient Cretaceous bedrock. It is a concretion. Concretions form when mineral cement precipitates and hardens around a nucleus within sedimentary rock layers. That nucleus can be anything, a fossil, a pebble, or in this case, a lost hammer. The process is not slow over millions of years. It can occur relatively quickly, especially in mineral-rich water. The specific chemistry of the Texas Creek bed, with its dissolved iron, calcium, and silica, provided perfect conditions. the hammer was likely lost by a miner or settler in the 19th century. It fell into the creek where silt and mineral-rich waters began to coat it. Over decades, perhaps a century, a hard, stone-like shell of limestone and other minerals formed around it, fusing it to the surrounding ancient creeked rocks. The petrification of the wood is also a known, rapid process in silica-rich environments. The concretion simply made it appear as if the modern tool was embedded in ancient stone, a perfect geological illusion. The London hammer, now housed in a creationist museum, remains a powerful symbol not of a solved mystery, but of an unbridgeable divide in how we interpret the past. It is a Rorschach test in stone and iron. One side sees a literal, earth-shattering contradiction that topples scientific orthodoxy. The other sees a fascinating example of how nature can manufacture profound deception through ordinary processes. The artifact forces a confrontation between two modes of thinking, one that takes apparent context as absolute proof, and another that seeks to understand the hidden mechanisms that can create false context. Its enduring power lies in its simplicity. It is not a complex temple or a cryptic manuscript. It is a simple tool, and its silent presence asks a question we all must grapple with. When we find something that seems to break all the rules, do we rewrite the rules, or do we look more deeply for the hidden rule that makes the impossible merely unexpected? From the deceptive geology of the London hammer, we move to a mystery carved from pure illusion, one that gleams with a cold, perfect light. The crystal skulls represent a legend born not in ancient temples, but in the romantic antiquities markets of the 19th century. A dozen or so of these life-sized carvings, most famously the Mitchell Hedges skull, surfaced during this era, each one a hauntingly beautiful replica of a human cranium fashioned from a single block of clear or milky quartz. The stories attached to them were intoxicating. They were said to be ancient Mesoamerican relics, perhaps from the Maya or Aztec, crafted by master artisans who somehow carved this incredibly hard mineral without the use of metal tools. Proponents claimed the skulls held psychic powers, that they could store knowledge or even project holographic images of their creators. The Mitchell Hedges skull, in particular, was touted as impossibly perfect, with a detachable jawbone that moved and an optical clarity that seemed to defy ancient craftsmanship. For decades, they were pillars of alternative archaeology, physical proof of a lost high technology. The truth, however, is a masterclass in modern myth-making. Beginning in the 1990s, scientific scrutiny shattered the legend. Microscopic analysis revealed telltale marks on the crystal surfaces. The grooves and cuts showed the unmistakable signature of high-speed, rotary wheels coated with diamond or carborundum abrasives, tools that only became available in the 19th century. There were no scratches consistent with hand-powered sanding or stone tools. Furthermore, investigations into their provenance found no credible archaeological records. Not a single skull had been excavated by a professional archaeologist. They all traced back to art dealers, most notably a Frenchman named Eugene Bobin, who was known to sell pre-Columbian fakes. The crystal skulls were, almost without exception, exquisite fakes, manufactured in European workshops in Germany and likely inspired by genuine, but much smaller and cruder Mesoamerican crystal beads and ornaments. The mystery was solved. They were beautiful hoaxes, products of a Victorian fascination with the occult and the exotic. Yet, in the wake of this debunking, a sliver of genuine ambiguity remains. A few skulls, like the one held by the British Museum, have proven slightly more resistant to absolute classification. While also showing evidence of modern tool marks, their exact origins and the date of their manufacture remain less definitively pinned down. Some researchers suggest a few might be colonial-era carvings from Mexico, using European tools but created by indigenous artisans, blurring the line between fake and authentic folk art. This tiny gray area is enough to keep a flicker of the legend alive. the enduring power of the crystal skulls lies not in their antiquity, but in our deep desire for them to be real. They represent a perfect object of mystery, cold and luminous, that seems to hold a secret just beyond our reach. Their debunking teaches a crucial lesson about how legends are born, not from ancient secrets, but from our own longing to find magic in the past, a longing that can be carved, polished, and sold to the highest bidder. A single weathered coin can hold the weight of 1,000 voyages. In 1957, during an archaeological dig at a Native American settlement site in Maine known as the Goddard Site, a volunteer named Guy Melgren unearthed a small, blackened disc of metal. It was roughly the size of a modern dime, heavily corroded, and initially dismissed as a common British penny or perhaps a stray button. But years later, after careful cleaning, the truth emerged. This was no ordinary coin. Its surface revealed a stylized cross, a triquetra symbol, and faint lettering that identified it beyond doubt as a Norse penny, a coin minted in Norway during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre between 1067 and 1093 of the Common Era. This is the main penny, and its discovery over 4,000 kilometers from the nearest known Viking settlement in Newfoundland has ignited a firestorm of debate that continues to this day. The coin is genuine. There is no doubt about its Norse origin or its age. The profound mystery lies in its journey. How did an 11th century Norwegian coin end up buried in a 12th century Native American shell midden on the coast of Maine? Two competing narratives, each with dramatic implications, vie for explanation. The first and most tantalizing is the possibility of direct Viking contact far south of their established base at Ellands Orks Meadows in Newfoundland. The sagas speak of a land called Vinland, a place of wild grapes and warmer shores, which many believe corresponds to parts of the northeastern North American coast. Could a Norse expedition have sailed further, perhaps into the Gulf of Maine, and lost or traded this single coin? It is a compelling vision, suggesting the Viking footprint in the New World was larger and more exploratory than our sparse archaeological record shows. A single coin could be the first trace of a forgotten landing, a fleeting encounter between worlds. The second, and statistically more probable, explanation involves the vast, interconnected trade networks of indigenous North America. We know these networks were astonishingly extensive, moving goods like copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains across thousands of kilometers. It is entirely plausible that the main penny entered this system at its northern fringe. A Norse trader in the Arctic, perhaps in Greenland or even Labrador, could have exchanged the coin with an Inuit or Dorset culture hunter. From there, through countless hands and countless trades over generations, the coin traveled southward, passing from tribe to tribe as a curious object, a piece of exotic material, until it finally came to rest in a Wabanaki settlement in Maine over a century after it was minted. This theory paints a picture not of Norse explorers, but of a dynamic Native American economy capable of moving a tiny piece of Europe deep into the continent long before Columbus. The debate often hinges on the concept of context. The coin was found not in a Viking longhouse, but amidst thousands of typical Native American artifacts, stone tools, pottery sherds, and the bones of local animals. For many archaeologists, this context is decisive. It points to the coin being an integrated, if rare, trade item within indigenous society, not evidence of a Norse campsite. Yet, the romantic possibility persists precisely because history is written by the survivors, and the Vikings left so few traces. The main penny is a ghost of a possibility, a whisper of a path not taken or a story not fully told. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. The North Atlantic in the 11th century was not an empty void, but a busy highway of Norse ships, Inuit kayaks, and indigenous trading canoes. In that complex web of movement and exchange, a single silver penny could have traveled in a Viking pouch or in a Native American medicine bag. its silent presence in the soil of Maine refuses to confirm either story, leaving us with a perfect, tiny artifact that weighs almost nothing, yet carries the heavy, unresolved question of how two worlds first touched. The vast, silent exchange hinted at by the Maine penny extends into the very ocean itself, where the waves hide ruins that challenge our understanding of geography and myth. Off the southern tip of Yonaguni, Japan's westernmost island, a dive into the clear Pacific reveals a sight that stops the breath. Looming from the seabed 25 meters below is a colossal formation of sandstone, a structure so angular and massive it seems to defy nature. This is the Yonaguni Monument, a series of immense flat terraces that drop in near-perfect steps, meeting in sharp 90-degree corners. There are wide, level platforms, straight-walled trenches, and two towering pillars that appear to support a ceiling overhead. Most striking of all are features that look hauntingly deliberate: a star-shaped pool, a triangular basin, and on one wall, the vague but unmistakable outline of what seems to be a carved face, reminiscent of the moai of Easter Island. The scale is staggering, covering an area larger than 2 football fields. When marine geologist Masaki Kimura first studied it in the 1980s, he became convinced this was not a quirk of geology, but a sunken city, perhaps 5,000 years old, submerged by a catastrophic earthquake. He pointed to the parallel channels, the symmetrical staircases, and the apparent tool marks as evidence of human hands. The romantic conclusion was irresistible. Had they found a lost piece of the legendary continent of Mu, a Pacific counterpart to Atlantis? Yet the ocean floor is a master of illusion. Other geologists, most notably Robert Schoch of Boston University, offer a powerful counter-argument. They note that the sandstone in this region is crisscrossed with natural horizontal and vertical bedding planes, lines of weakness that erode easily in the strong underwater currents. This type of rock can fracture and shear with stunning regularity, creating flat surfaces, sharp edges, and even what appear to be steps or platforms, all through the blind, persistent force of nature. The carved face could be a classic example of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns where none exist, especially in a shadowy, aquatic environment. The monument, they argue, is a magnificent example of a natural sandstone mesa, sculpted by tectonic forces and tidal erosion into a form that teasingly mimics architecture. The debate remains suspended in salt water, unresolved. Diving on the structure is an experience of profound ambiguity. You swim through passages that feel like corridors, over ledges that resemble altars, all while knowing the relentless sea is fully capable of carving such grandeur on its own. It forces a question not just about the past, but about perception itself. When we find something that looks so deliberately built, at what point does the resemblance become evidence, and when is it merely a breathtaking coincidence of geology? That same question of natural mimicry echoes in the warm, shallow waters near Bimini in the Bahamas. Here, in just 6 meters of crystalline sea, lies a formation that seems even more explicitly man-made. The Bimini Road, discovered in 1968, is a perfect J-shaped line of massive, rectangular limestone blocks. Each block is roughly square, many measuring around 4 meters across, and they are laid end to end in a seemingly purposeful curve for almost half a mile across the sandy bottom. From above, it looks uncannily like the foundation of a massive wall, or a paved road leading from nowhere to nowhere, submerged by rising seas. For those who believe in the lost civilization of Atlantis, described by Plato as lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the discovery was a revelation. Here in the Atlantic was what appeared to be a tangible piece of that sunken world, a harbor wall or a ceremonial causeway from a forgotten metropolis. The timing of its discovery, right when interest in Atlantis was surging, felt like destiny. But geology, once again, provides a compelling and less mythical explanation. The blocks are composed of beach rock, a type of sandstone that forms naturally in the intertidal zone. As sand and shell fragments cement together over centuries, they often fracture along regular horizontal and vertical lines, creating what are called joints. When sea levels rise or the land subsides, these cemented slabs can sink below the waves, where further erosion can accentuate the blocks, making them look like neatly cut pavers. Core samples taken from the Bimini Road show the stone is natural beach rock, and the road aligns with the ancient shoreline, exactly where such a formation would be expected. There are no tool marks, no mortar, and no other associated artifacts like pottery or tools that would confirm human construction. To a geologist, the Bimini Road is a textbook example of a fractured beach rock formation, a beautiful accident of coastal processes. Yet for those who stand on the side of a lost history, the perfection of the curve, the consistency of the block sizes, and the sheer linearity feel too ordered to be random. They argue that natural fracturing does not typically produce such a long, unbroken, and gracefully curved line of similarly sized rectangles. The debate, much like at Yonaguni, becomes a philosophical standoff between two ways of seeing. One trusts the documented, slow-motion artistry of geological forces. The other listens to the intuitive whisper that says this arrangement is too purposeful, too architectural, to be anything but a footprint from a drowned epoch. Together, Yonaguni and Bimini present a dual mystery of the deep. They are places where the line between a natural wonder and a human one dissolves in the shimmering light filtering down from the surface, leaving us to wonder if we are looking at the world's most convincing geological prank, or the slowly fading signatures of continents that slipped beneath the waves, leaving only these ambiguous clues to their once great existence. The shimmering ambiguity of sunken structures gives way to a tale carved in stone and steeped in modern myth. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te was said to be exploring the remote Bayan Karaula Mountains on the border between China and Tibet. His expedition reportedly entered a series of caves and made a bizarre discovery. Scattered across the cave floors, partially buried in the dust, were hundreds of stone discs, each about the size of a vinyl record, roughly 30 centimeters in diameter and a centimeter thick. There were 716 in total. At first glance, they seemed like simple ritual objects, but a closer look revealed something extraordinary. Each disc had a fine, double-grooved spiral originating from a hole in its center, and etched along that spiral groove was a continuous line of tiny, hieroglyphic-like characters, a script so small it was nearly microscopic. According to the story, Kai Pu-te took the discs back for study, but they were largely ignored for 2 decades, dismissed as curious but indecipherable artifacts. Then, in the 1960s, a researcher named Tsum Nui supposedly made a breakthrough. Using advanced equipment, he claimed to have not only read the script but translated its incredible story. The inscriptions told of a people called the Dropa, whose spacecraft had crash-landed in the inhospitable mountains 12,000 years ago. Unable to repair their vessel, the survivors, described as small, frail beings with large heads, tried to make peace with the local Ham tribesmen, but were met with fear and hostility. The discs, the translation asserted, were the recorded history of this stranded alien race. To support this, the story often includes a later detail that in the caves alongside the discs, skeletons were found of unusually small, large-headed beings, fitting the description of the marooned Dropa. This narrative is a cornerstone of ancient astronaut theory, a perfect capsule of a crashed UFO, alien contact, and physical evidence preserved in stone. It offers a tangible artifact, a written record, and even skeletal proof. There is only one profound problem with the Dropa stones. In the eyes of mainstream archaeology and credible historiography, the entire story is almost certainly an elaborate hoax, a modern fabrication that snowballed into legend. No reputable institution has ever exhibited or studied these discs. The central figures, Kai Pu-te and Tsum Nui, cannot be verified as real scholars in any academic records of the time. The initial reports did not surface in any peer-reviewed archaeological journals, but instead appeared in sensationalist magazines. When investigators have tried to track down the original stones, they have always led to dead ends or private collections that refuse access. The supposed scientific analysis, including claims that the stones contained high levels of cobalt and other metallic elements, has never been documented in a verifiable way. Most tellingly, the story's details evolved and grew more dramatic with each retelling, a classic hallmark of an urban legend. The likely origin of the myth lies in a combination of real but misunderstood artifacts and outright fiction. The region does have a history of stone discs, often used as ritual by discs in ancient Chinese cultures, but these lack the intricate spiral inscriptions. The tale seems to have been constructed in the mid-20th century, perhaps inspired by the era's flying saucer craze, and then propagated through popular books on unexplained phenomena. Its persistence is a fascinating study in itself. The Dropa stones endure not because of their archaeological merit, but because they fulfill a powerful narrative desire. They provide a simple, physical answer to the big questions, a first-hand account of contact etched in rock. They represent the ultimate cold case, one where the evidence is always just out of reach, ensuring the mystery can never be fully disproven to those who wish to believe. In the end, the stones are less a mystery of the ancient world and more a mirror of our modern one, reflecting our enduring hope that the cosmos has visited us, and that proof, if we just look hard enough, is waiting in a cave somewhere covered in dust and tiny, unreadable writing. The line between an ancient artifact and a modern invention is often blurred by desire, and no object illustrates this tension more clearly than a small, circular piece of black stone. Housed in a private collection, the so-called genetic disc is a curious object about 22 centimeters in diameter, carved from a resilient stone called lyddite. Its surface is divided into sections, each filled with intricate carvings that, to the modern eye, seem to depict scenes of profound biological knowledge. One section clearly shows a sperm cell penetrating an ovum. Another shows the stages of fetal development, from a simple cluster of cells to a recognizable human form. Other carvings illustrate what appear to be detailed cellular structures and the process of mitosis, the division of a cell into two. These are not symbolic or stylized images. They are precise, anatomical diagrams of processes that were completely invisible to the human eye until the invention of the microscope in the 17th century. The implication is staggering. If this disc is genuinely ancient, it suggests its creators possessed an understanding of human reproduction and cellular biology that rivals our own, knowledge acquired without any optical technology we recognize. This artifact has become a cornerstone for theories of a lost civilization with advanced scientific insight, perhaps even visitors from elsewhere who shared such knowledge. The imagery feels like a textbook page carved in stone, a direct challenge to our entire narrative of scientific progress. However, the disc exists in a profound archaeological vacuum. It has no provenance, there is no record of its excavation, no documented site where it was found, and no other artifacts discovered alongside it to provide context or date it. It simply appeared on the antiquities market, reportedly from Colombia. Major museums and academic institutions do not display or recognize it, as its origins cannot be verified. To an archaeologist, an object without context is an object without a history, its story impossible to authenticate. Skeptics argue the disc is likely a modern creation, a clever hoax or a piece of contemporary folk art designed to appeal to the lucrative market for ancient mysteries. The precision of the biological imagery, they note, is exactly what someone with a basic high school biology textbook could produce today. The stone itself, lyddite, is hard but can be worked with modern tools. Without a chain of custody linking it to a legitimate dig, the genetic disc remains an intriguing question mark, powerful in its imagery but weightless in terms of historical evidence. Its true power, therefore, may not lie in what it tells us about the past, but in what it reveals about our present. It acts as a perfect Rorschach test. For some, it is physical proof of forgotten genius. For others, it is a cautionary tale about how easily we can project our modern understanding onto the past, creating mysteries where perhaps only artistry and ambiguity exist. The disk holds up a mirror, and in its polished black surface, we do not see ancient biologists, but our own deep yearning to find our knowledge reflected in the artifacts of a distant, unknowable time. The deep past holds metals that should not exist, and few embody this paradox more perfectly than a small, wedge-shaped object found in a Romanian sand quarry. In 1974, workers digging near the town of Ayad along the banks of the Mureș River uncovered something startling. Buried under approximately 10 meters of sand and clay, they found a collection of ancient mastodon bones. Nestled among those prehistoric remains, as if placed there deliberately, was a strange metal wedge. It was about 20 centimeters long, 12 wide, and 7 thick, with 2 perfectly round holes drilled through it and signs of heavy impact on one end. The wedge was covered in a thick layer of aluminum oxide, a patina that forms over long periods. Initial analysis confirmed the shocking truth: the object was composed almost entirely of aluminum. This is the Ayad wedge, and its existence presents a chronological impossibility that has fueled debate for decades. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found in its pure metallic form in nature. It is always bound with other elements, most commonly in bauxite ore. To separate the pure metal requires a complex industrial process called electrolysis, which involves passing a powerful electric current through molten cryolite. This technology was not developed until the 1820s, and aluminum remained a precious laboratory curiosity until the late 19th century. So how could a nearly pure aluminum object be buried in a layer of earth alongside the bones of a mastodon, a creature that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago? The initial geological assessment of the stratum suggested an age of at least 11,000 years, but possibly much older. This single artifact seemed to tear a hole in the timeline of human technological progress. The most common and most grounded explanation is that the wedge is not ancient at all, but a modern piece of industrial equipment. Skeptics point to its shape and the impact marks. The object bears a striking resemblance to the tooth of a heavy excavator bucket, the kind used in mining or dredging. Such teeth are often made from cast aluminum alloys for specific applications where weight is a factor. The theory goes that a piece of excavator machinery broke off during work in the quarry in the 20th century and became buried in the sediment, eventually being mistaken for an ancient artifact when found alongside the much older mastodon bones. Proponents of this view argue that the geological dating of the stratum was misinterpreted, and that the wedge simply sank through looser sediments to rest near the fossils, a common occurrence in archaeology known as stratigraphic displacement. This explanation neatly resolves the technological paradox by placing the object firmly in the modern era. Yet the mystery is not so easily dismissed. Subsequent, though controversial, analyses of the wedge's composition revealed another oddity. Tests reportedly showed the metal contained an unusual alloy mix of 12 different elements, including copper, zinc, silicon, and lead. This specific alloy, some researchers claimed, did not match any standard modern industrial aluminum alloy used for excavator teeth, which are typically simpler and harder. The thick, layered oxide crust also suggested an age far greater than a few decades, according to some metallurgists. This data, though disputed, fuels the fringe theories. If the wedge is genuinely ancient, its implications are world-altering. One possibility is that it represents a fragment of knowledge from a lost, advanced prehistoric civilization that mastered a form of metallurgy we have yet to rediscover. Another, even more speculative idea, often whispered in alternative history circles, suggests the object is a piece of non-human technology, perhaps a component from a crashed vehicle of extraterrestrial origin left behind in the distant past. The Ayod wedge, now sitting in a museum in Cluj-Napoca, remains an enigma wrapped in aluminum oxide. It is a classic conflict between Occam's razor and the thrilling possibility of anomaly. Do we accept the simpler, modern explanation of a misplaced tool, or do we allow for the staggering idea that our understanding of history's technological peaks is fundamentally incomplete? The wedge offers no answers, only a heavy, metallic silence, waiting for the day when our science can definitively tell its true story. Our final mystery is not carved in stone or buried in sand, but lies shrouded in the cold, dark waters of the Baltic Sea. In the summer of 2011, a Swedish dive team named Ocean X was using side-scan sonar to search for old shipwrecks. Their equipment painted a picture of the seafloor, and what it revealed was unlike anything they had ever seen. Resting on the seabed, 60 meters below the surface, was a massive, circular object. It measured roughly 60 meters across, and its shape was bizarrely geometric. The sonar image showed a main disc-like body with a distinct raised structure on top, and trailing behind it, a long, straight track over 300 meters long, as if the object had skidded to a halt. To many who saw the first images, the silhouette was unmistakable. It looked with an almost shocking clarity, like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, a crashed starship resting in the abyss. This was the Baltic Sea anomaly, and the initial discovery was only the beginning of the strangeness. When the divers finally reached the object, the mystery deepened. Their equipment began to behave erratically. Cameras and satellite phones would suddenly fail when they approached the structure, only to function normally again when they ascended. One diver reported that his flashlight would not work when pointed directly at the object. This persistent electrical interference fueled speculation that the anomaly was emitting some kind of energy field. Visually, the object was covered in thick layers of sediment and strange, black soot-like formations, but its edges appeared unnaturally straight. The long trail behind it was not a trench, but a raised ridge, suggesting the object had pushed material aside as it moved. Samples brought to the surface were analyzed, with some reports claiming the material was not volcanic rock, but metals like limonite and goethite, which could form through natural processes but also through prolonged heat. The explanations for the anomaly fall into two very different worlds. Geologists and mainstream scientists point to a perfectly natural, if unusual, formation. They propose it is a glacial deposit, a large nodule of rock left behind by a retreating Ice Age glacier thousands of years ago. The straight track could be a glacial flute, a line carved by ice dragging debris across the bedrock. The geometric shape could be a trick of perspective and sonar shadow, with the electrical malfunctions caused by the high concentration of metals in the rock interfering with the diver's equipment. In this view, the Baltic Sea anomaly is a fascinating geological oddity, nothing more. Yet, the human mind is not wired for simple geology when faced with such a perfect, iconic shape. The more sensational theories took flight immediately. The most popular, of course, is that it is a crashed UFO, a vessel from another world that met its end in our oceans, its technology still faintly disrupting electronics. Others, delving into 20th century history, suggested it could be a secret Nazi device from World War II, perhaps an experimental anti-submarine weapon or a lost piece of radar-absorbent technology, explaining its angular design. Some even proposed it was a sunken, prehistoric structure from a time when the Baltic Basin was dry land. The true power of the Baltic Sea anomaly lies in its timing. It was not found in the 1800s or even the 1950s. It was discovered in the 21st century with advanced digital sonar, and yet it remains just as unexplained and just as hotly debated as any ancient ruin. It proves that our planet has not given up all its secrets. The deep sea, which covers most of our world, is still a frontier, and within its darkness we can still find shapes that defy our expectations and ignite our imagination. It serves as the perfect closing note for our journey. From the oldest temples to the deepest seas, the past is not a closed book. It is an ongoing conversation between what we think we know and what we continue to discover, a reminder that mystery is not a relic of history, but a permanent feature of our world, waiting for the next curious eye to find it. Standing before these 25 enigmas, a single, profound question echoes through the silence. Are we looking at the scattered fragments of a forgotten world, or are we staring into a mirror, seeing our own reflection in the weathered stone? This is the great divide at the heart of every ancient mystery, the tension between two compelling narratives. One whispers of lost knowledge, of civilizations that reached heights we can barely comprehend, only to have their wisdom erased by time, disaster, or the simple fragility of human memory. The other speaks of a persistent human tendency, our own modern minds projecting our logic and our tools onto the sacred and symbolic creations of the past. The lost knowledge narrative is a powerful and romantic one. It suggests that history is not a straight line of progress, but a cycle of peaks and valleys, with entire epochs of achievement slipping into the abyss. Think of the Antikythera Mechanism. Its existence implies a school of engineering and astronomy so advanced that its principles were not rediscovered for over a millennium. Its isolation feels like a tragedy, a single, surviving whisper from a conversation that was permanently silenced. The same feeling arises with the impossible precision of Puma Punku stonework or the mind-bending scale of the Longyu caves. These are not just big projects, they are projects that seem to demand a technical vocabulary we assume ancient people did not possess. Where is the evidence of the gradual development, the trial and error that should lead to such mastery? Its absence fuels the idea of a catastrophic reset, a flood, an earthquake, or a social collapse so complete that it severed the chain of knowledge, leaving only the most durable monuments behind as cryptic tombstones for a forgotten genius. This idea is deeply intertwined with the fragility of pre-literate cultures. For thousands of years, humanity's greatest discoveries, from star charts to medicinal recipes, were not stored in libraries but in living memory, passed from elder to apprentice through song, story, and ritual. One broken link in that chain, one generation lost to war or famine, and an entire library of understanding could vanish into the air. The purpose of Göbekli Tepe, the meaning of the Kochno stone spirals, the true function of the Costa Rican spheres, all could have been perfectly clear to their builders, explained in ceremonies and teachings that died with the last priest who understood them. What we excavate, then, are not puzzles but the empty shells of a once vibrant understanding, leaving us to guess at the life that once inhabited them. Yet, for every compelling case of lost knowledge, there is an equally powerful argument from skepticism. This view suggests our greatest error is chronological snobbery, the assumption that because something looks advanced to us, it must have been advanced technology to them. We see a light bulb in the dendera carving because we live in a world lit by electricity. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world animated by gods, where the sun was a bark sailing through the underworld and light was a divine gift. Is it not more likely that the relief is a sophisticated metaphor for that divine light, using the most advanced container imagery they knew rather than a technical diagram? We look at the Baghdad jars and sea batteries because we understand electrochemistry, but without wires, switches, or any textual reference to tingling metals or mysterious glows, is it not more probable they held scrolls, their unique design serving a spiritual, not an electrical purpose? This modern lens can profoundly distort our interpretation. The crystal skulls are the ultimate cautionary tale, where our desire for ancient mystery was so strong we believed in flawless quartz carvings long after science had proven them to be modern fakes. The London hammer shows how a natural process, concretion, can create an illusion so perfect it seems to break the laws of geology. The Bagong pipes remind us that nature, over millions of years, is a master sculptor capable of creating forms that look engineered with an intelligence they utterly lack. In these cases, the mystery is not in the artifact, but in our own perception, our brain's irresistible urge to find pattern, purpose, and familiar shapes in the random beauty of the natural world. So, which perspective is true? The answer, frustratingly, is that both hold weight, and every ancient phenomenon sits somewhere on the spectrum between them. The Great Pyramid is almost certainly not the product of alien levitation or geopolymer concrete, but its construction still involves logistical and engineering feats that modern scholars cannot replicate with the tools they believe the Egyptians had. This gap between the accepted tools and the achieved result is where the genuine mystery lies, a space that could be filled by a lost, simpler technique we haven't thought of, or by a level of patient, coordinated human effort we have simply underestimated. This is the true value of these 25 unexplained phenomena. They are not necessarily proof of ancient astronauts or antediluvian super-civilizations. They are, more importantly, signposts pointing to the limits of our own understanding. They challenge the arrogance of assuming we know exactly how the past worked. They force historians, archaeologists, and all of us to stay humble, to question our assumptions, and to remain open to the possibility that the human story is far more complex, creative, and surprising than our textbooks can contain. They teach us that the past is not a passive thing to be decoded, but an active conversation where we ask questions of the artifacts, and they, in their silent way, ask even deeper questions of us. Perhaps the most powerful tool in this new era is not a scanner, but a microscope. Archaeogenetics, the study of ancient DNA, has transformed bones and teeth into biographical archives. By extracting and sequencing genetic material from skeletal remains, scientists can now trace population migrations with startling precision, solving debates that have lasted for centuries. Take the enigmatic megalith builders of Western Europe. For generations, scholars wondered if the spread of massive stone tombs like Stonehenge was driven by the movement of people or simply the spread of an idea. Ancient DNA provided a clear and surprising answer. Analysis of remains from Neolithic tombs across Ireland, Britain, and Scandinavia showed that the people who built these monuments were largely descended from a single wave of farmers who migrated from Anatolia thousands of years earlier, almost completely replacing the older hunter-gatherer populations. The stones were not just an imported fashion, they were the cultural signature of a new people reshaping a continent. Similarly, isotope analysis, which reads the chemical signatures locked in tooth enamel and bone, acts as a lifelong travel log. The water and food you consume as a child leave a distinct geographic fingerprint in your body. By analyzing these isotopes, researchers can determine where a person grew up and sometimes even trace their movements across the landscape. This has solved countless mysteries of individual artifacts. A Viking sword found in a grave in Scotland might be traced to the iron mines of Sweden through its metallic signature. The skeleton of a high-status woman in a Bronze Age German tomb, buried with rich goods, was revealed through strontium isotopes to have been born hundreds of miles away, evidence of a strategic marriage alliance that wove distant communities together. These tools are demystifying the past in ways our predecessors could only dream of, turning legend into data and speculation into fact. Yet, in a beautiful and predictable twist, each answered question seems to birth a dozen new ones, often more profound than the original. L'idea strips away the jungle to reveal a vast, unknown city, but then we must ask who ruled this city, what language did they speak, why was it abandoned? The genetic data confirms a mass migration into Europe, but then we must grapple with the uncomfortable reality of near-total population replacement and ask what triggered such a decisive and complete demographic shift. The tools give us a map, but the territory is still a wilderness of human stories. Sometimes the technology reveals paradoxes that deepen the mystery rather than solve it. Ground-penetrating radar might confirm the existence of a hidden chamber beneath a pyramid, but if we cannot ethically or safely access it, the confirmation only amplifies the tantalizing unknown. DNA from a remote Pacific island might show a previously unsuspected genetic link to South America, reigniting the debate over transoceanic contact with a single, irrefutable data point that begs for a narrative. This is the endless cycle of discovery. We use our brightest lights to illuminate the dark corners of history, and in that new illumination, we see the outlines of even larger, darker rooms we never knew were there. The promise of modern technology is not that it will finally lay all the ghosts of the past to rest. Its true gift is the guarantee that the conversation will never end, that for as long as we are curious, the ancient world will have new secrets to whisper, waiting for the next generation of tools and the next generation of wonder to hear them. From the promise of future discoveries to the lingering questions of the past, our journey has covered a vast and mysterious landscape. We have wandered through the echoing halls of underground cities like Derinkuyu, marveled at the impossible precision of Sacsayhuaman stones, and stared into the silent eyes of the Voynich manuscript's unreadable script. We have weighed the possibility of ancient electricity in Baghdad jars and puzzled over the purpose of a 2,000-year-old Greek computer found at the bottom of the sea. Each artifact, each ruin, is a fragment of a conversation we can only half hear, a story with most of its pages missing. Some of these wonders may be the work of lost civilizations whose genius flickered out long ago. Others might be breathtaking natural formations, their resemblance to human design a magnificent coincidence sculpted by wind, water, and time. And still others remain genuine enigmas, puzzles waiting for that one brilliant insight, that one new piece of technology, to finally click into place and reveal their truth. But perhaps that is the real lesson here. History is not a closed book with a single, authoritative narrative written in stone. It is a living library, constantly being revised with each new dig, each satellite scan, each fragment of DNA pulled from the Earth. These 25 unexplained phenomena are not failures of understanding, they are invitations. They invite us to stay curious, to question the comfortable stories, and to remain humble in the face of our ancestors' staggering creativity and the planet's capacity for wonder. They remind us that the world is still full of secrets, and that the greatest adventures often begin with a single, baffling question left behind by those who came before us. So, what do you think of all the mysteries we explored? Which one captured your imagination the most? Was it the buried temple of Göbekli Tepe rewriting our entire timeline? The silent, walking giants of Easter Island, or the haunting, geometric perfection of the Bimini Road beneath the waves? Let us know your favorite in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, please give this video a like. It helps more curious minds find their way here. And be sure to subscribe, because the past is never finished telling its story, and we will be here ready for the next journey. Thank you for watching.